So thank you for being back in time. Our next speaker is Dr. Tatiana Revenko. So she will first introduce all of you into what data protection actually entails. Tatiana has a background here at ULB. She did a PhD in the lab of Professor Cédric Pampin, which probably many of you know. He's a top cancer specialist. So she did his PhD with him. While she did that, she followed this program. I don't remember in what year. I think in my memory, I put it as 2018, but I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But this is an ITH interdisciplinary program alumni. And maybe this is the time, since we will not see each other face to face after today, to introduce you to the fact that we indeed have an ITH alumni page. Connect to that. And if you have interesting news to share, some of you are active on it. And then whatever they do in their professional career, they post it. We can make some advertisements. And I really, every year again, I try to here and there change the program a little. So I also continue to learn. But some of you will have a fascinating career or know people who really would fit to give a lecture. And actually, this is how, after the program, Tatiana and I stayed in touch. She is a real data specialist. And then after giving this lecture, we decided really that this is something that most of you will use in your career, seeing what you can do with data and samples, how far you can go with respect to the GDPR rules. So then Tatiana decided that this is worth a workshop. So what I want to say is that she's now here at your disposal to give her experience or share her expertise with you, but also if you have ideas for people or yourselves to involve as a speaker in the program, those that come in the future, or think of workshops, don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you. And also after the lecture, so those of you who don't stay for the workshop, after the lecture, you can sign the presence form. And then those who stay for the workshop, they can sign for the workshop after it finishes at 4:30.
Thank you, Hilde, for this invitation and for the introduction. And I'm glad to be here again and to see everyone. Well, it's Friday afternoon. I hope you are not too tired. I think you had a lot of lectures during the whole week, right? So I want to do this presentation quite interactive. If you have questions, just raise your hand and don't hesitate to participate. I will first do an introduction so that we have an overview about the data and the rules about the data, and then we will do the workshop in groups. So I wanted to start just with a small question, and just raise your hand, I'll come by. What health data has been generated by you and about you in the last 6 months? Do someone know, or someone wants to try to answer? There are no bad answers, actually. This is something that is open, so don't be afraid to answer. Someone wants to say something, some ideas? Is everyone sleeping or too tired? Okay, I hope this afternoon will not be too boring. Interesting. You can say your name and just where you what faculty?
With smartwatches.
Yes, exactly.
I think apps for running.
Yeah. Great. Someone has other ideas? Or yeah?
Okay. My name is
Okay.
it's about the period tracking applications. So takes the race period and takes symptoms. And other than that, my next is health, which is the application that gathers the patients.
Okay, yeah, so health apps, wearables. Would someone go to a consultation with a medical doctor?
Yeah. I was about to say, some people who are
So it's to receive care, right?
Yeah.
So this is more straightforward. In the hospital, you're located at the hospital, and the doctor uses it to prescribe treatment. But those who are using wearables, do you know who holds your data and where is it stored? Those who are using the health apps, for example.
Say that's that stored on the material, not in the cloud. Not supposed to be shared.
Yeah, so it's not supposed to be shared unless we allow, right?
Not really know.
We didn't try to notice because it's usually
Yeah.
takes 20 pages. That's what everyone does. How about the app users?
What I heard about is the application book. They have like some weeks and they have patients are in general, so probably it's not as important. So it's kind of like sharing without the consent.
Okay. Thank you very much. For this sharing about your experience, where your data was shared, etc. So today I will try to explain you a little bit the rules that shape actually this data sharing, for which purposes and who can use this, who can use it. Then I will explain you why the notions of data are very important from legal, regulatory perspectives. And then I will introduce you something new that European Union wants to put in place to enhance actually the data sharing and use for innovation, for policy regulations, for several things which we will address in this presentation. I think this is not working. Okay. So I wanted to start the presentation with a simple case, which I think everyone had the occasion to go through. So there is a patient. The patient comes to a consultation because some clinical symptoms were worsening. So it comes to the medical doctor and expects to get some care. The medical doctor wants to do a genetic test to see if the worsening conditions are not related to some genetic disorders. So the doctor prescribes the genetic test, the patient undergoes it, but then if we are in a hospital like that, here it's a university hospital, like where they research, the researchers, they want to see and to check if the data from that patient, the results of this genetic test can be associated with these clinical symptoms. So I want to introduce you by this example, first of all, what we call the primary use of health data, which is used for treatment, and then the secondary use of data. So what the researcher wants to do is to reuse the data. So when the doctor receives the results, to interpret the genetic test, he needs some context. So alone, the genetic test doesn't mean anything. So the doctor should have access to some scans, to MRI images, or some other results. So he must go somewhere to find them. The same thing for the researcher. To find first of all, the mutation and check if there are any other information about this mutation, he needs to go besides the health records with the symptoms which were described by the doctor. He needs to find registries where other genetic tests were done on other people and then compare with the database if there is any known mutation and to see how this fits. It means that they have to go to different data sources for both of them. But today the problem is that all those data sources are located in different places. Besides that, like laboratories, patient-generated data, as you said, via the health apps or wearables, electronic health records, which are held by the hospitals, libraries, databases, etc. And the problem is that when these data are in so different places, it's very hard to make this data interoperable. Meaning it's very hard, the data are in different formats, and sometimes those formats are not interchangeable, so from technical point of view. Also, there are problems when you want to access the data. It's not that easy to give the access. There are also conditions when it should be done. Sometimes you just don't know where you can find the data as a researcher. So besides these technical complexities, there are also ethical and regulatory complexities because all these things are regulated, and we will see which are the main rules that regulate it. And often in hospitals, all this legacy for data is quite outdated, and they're very hesitant to invest actually in the new spaces, in the new technologies to put the data in good formats. So even within hospital internally, it's very hard to share the data between the units. But clearly, data sharing is very important. So as we saw, it is important for the primary care. Let's imagine if you are sick somewhere outside your country, the other doctors, they must have access to your data about your health to be able to provide you care. Data sharing is also important for innovation, especially when we try to find the treatments for rare diseases. The cohorts are very small, and so the results generated are really don't have that enough statistical power to make some conclusions. Of course, AI-based tools no go without data. Data is the basis when you want to develop an AI tool, whether it is as a standalone tool, whether it is integrated in a medical device. And finally, for the clinical research, to mimic the drug potential targets, so from the R&D departments until to the bed of the patients. And lastly, it's important to share the data in case of emergency situations like pandemics, as we saw during COVID. It's a very good example because the data was shared first between the governments. Let's say the spread of the virus. So the governments could take decisions how to contain the spread. Clinical symptoms versus the type of mutation of COVID were shared between clinicians all over the world, so they could adapt optimal care because we didn't know how to treat this disease. And finally, the genome of the COVID was shared between the researchers, so they would develop the vaccine very fast and to put it on the market. But importantly, why it was so fast is because all the safety events that were collected previously for RNA-based vaccines, they were done for other, for rheumatoid diseases. So all the safety events from rheumatoid diseases were collected, shared, and it was a very strong dossier to put on market very fast the vaccine. But data sharing cannot be done freely, so it should be compliantly with the regulation in secure environments from cybersecurity point of view, from IT. It should be also occur between the trusted parties. You don't share data whoever you don't know. And clearly, data sharing should be a strategy internally at the level of an organization, but also externally within the partnerships and at the level of the whole country. And so what was done by the European Union to support this data sharing and the secondary use. Clearly, European Union plans for 2030 to become a lighthouse for innovation. Europe wants to maintain the competitiveness at the international level. Today, unfortunately, the regulatory requirements are very burdensome, but they want to simplify those. They want to accelerate the administrative processes and also to put an infrastructure in place as EHDS, a European Health Data Space, to enhance the data sharing for innovation. A lot of AI factories, meaning who are having big computer powers, are being put in place in different European member states. And actually, they offer a very good environment for researchers who want to develop AI tools and can come and test them with easier access conditions. So the goal is to create actually a single market at the European Union level between 25 European member states. And of course, and not least, is to enhance the funding, because the funding in Europe now is mostly public, but which is clearly not enough for innovation. So there will be rules about at the economic level to enhance the private and venture capitals in European Union. I put here a little notice around the digital omnibus. So actually, digital omnibus is already something that Europe proposed in November regarding the simplification measures. And so now they're just awaiting the parliament to vote for it. And we'll see what will be in place. Did someone hear about the European Health Data Space? How many of you heard about it? 1, 2, 3, okay. European Health Data Space is a project at the European Union level, so it's the first and common European data space. It will be like an infrastructure to share health data, but under the electronic format. So European Health Data Space also helps to create like a governance framework for access and for sharing of the data, and to promote interoperability by saying which kind of standards should be applied. So this European Health Data Space is accompanied with regulation, which is also called Health Data Space Regulation. It's sector specific. It's specific for healthcare and for life sciences. It's the first space Europe will put in place. So it's like a pilot one, because they also plan to put the same thing in finance and agriculture, which will follow after the EHDS. So it's quite recent regulation which entered into force last year, and it will apply progressively. It means it's not just everything it's written in it applies in one shot, but the application will come step by step, so that those who are having data, those who want to use it, but also importantly, individuals, patients to whom the data belongs, they can get aware about it and get prepared. I also added here a very important regulation, which is important in our daily life, because we are talking about data, about personal data, which belongs to you, to individuals. So the European General Data Protection Regulation. And this regulation, it aims to protect individuals. So while the first one is more broader, it provides technical aspects, governance aspects, interoperability aspects. This one is purely focusing on the individuals, on the protection of individuals' rights and freedoms when their personal data is being used. And this regulation is not specific for healthcare sector. It should be applied specifically, and it also forms the pillar for EHDS regulation. So that's why we will talk today about both of them. So the interdependence between the GDPR and the EHDS regulation is that the personal health data under electronic format is being exchanged. Just a small word, the EHDS regulation is not focused exclusively on electronic personal health data. It includes also personal health data as is and non-personal health data. So both of them are regulations at the European Union level, meaning that they were voted by the European Parliament, represented by all the European member states and the Council of the European Union. And the goal is to harmonize these regulations in all the member states. And harmonizing this regulation will also help to make this single market easier so that everyone has the same rules. And how it will happen, actually, all the member states, they are obliged to implement this regulation in their national laws. And yeah, keeping sometimes some specificities, but I will not go into the details because it will become more questions than answers. So why I'm talking about these two regulations, so who is concerned by those two regulations is clearly, first of all, the individuals to whom the data belongs, but also the organizations. And the organizations, both from the public sector, from the private sector, and it is regardless their size. So from the big pharma companies to small startups, they must all comply with those regulations. And when you ask me if the organization is located outside European Union, should they comply with our regulation? In which case, yes, they should comply in case they are doing processing personal data of the European Union residents. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think, what kind of data is in healthcare environment? Does anyone wants to raise their hand? What do you think? You come from a hospital. What types of data from you the hospital can collect, for example?
Medical history.
Okay.
Also, when you do the blood test, then you have
The results from laboratory.
you have laboratory parameters, genetic testing as well.
Yeah.
Not really.
Okay. So in one word, it's like health data, and besides that, something else. Yeah.
Personal information. Where they live, their age.
Yes. Right. Something else. Well, also when you. Yeah.
Social security.
Yes. Card ID. Yes. When you pay for the consultation. Yeah. Financial data. So yeah, those are all different types of data that is collected within the healthcare environment: patient data, health data, administrative, operational data, financial billing data. Why I'm talking about these types of data? Because depending on the type of data, the risks on the individuals, if there are violations, are different. It has also different legal implications related to compliance, what the organization should put in place, and of course the security controls. Because health data is considered as sensitive data, and it should be protected with very robust security controls in comparison, for example, just with financial data, right? So what is data? Just a simple definition. It's any digital representation of acts or facts or any information or compilation of those acts or information, so like sound, visual information, audio-visual recording, all that is considered as data. Now, to data, we are adding personal data. What is personal data? I will provide you definitions from these regulations because we are talking about the regulations today. So it is any information relating to a natural person. It can be identified. He can be identified directly. For example, name, surname, ID number from the identity card, or it can be identified indirectly. Meaning, if you have some information, but you compile the information and you can figure out who is the individual with that information. I want to bring your attention that encrypted data, usually when the data is stored on clouds, it's encrypted. The emails, when you send, they are encrypted, right? And pseudonymized data, meaning coded data, they are also considered as personal data. And I'll explain you further the differences between the pseudonymized and anonymized data. Examples of personal data, surname, name, address, even your CV, it's considered a personal data. Location, the IP address on your computer, this is personal data. But what is health data? So health data is personal data related to physical and mental health of a natural person, including the provision of healthcare services, which might reveal information about the health status. So it's a definition from GDPR. And genetic data, it is defined separately from health data because they have a unique information about the physiology or the health of a natural person. Examples of health data, it's a little bit what we discussed today, what we just said, results from the lab, genetic tests, medical history, CT scans, all these are considered as health data. And now we add just the word electronic, because now everything goes in the digital formats. We're using less and less paper, and we will talk about the HDS, which aims only, which considers only the electronic health data, so it's the same as the health data, but in the electronic format. And the personal electronic health data can be personal or non-personal. And non-personal, for example, you might collect some information about the environment on a certain disease at the population level, so that will not be considered as a personal data. And so we're coming to these differences, personal, no personal, now regular and sensitive data. So the GDPR describes two types of data. So the regular data is just name, professional address, CVs, and the sensitive data is any data regarding the health, the genetic data, the biometric data, and ethnic and racial origins are considered as sensitive, which we always collect during the clinical trials. And data concerning an individual sexual life or orientation is sensitive. And when the data is sensitive, it means special categories of data. And health data is a special category of data, meaning that actually to process the data, it is prohibited by the GDPR, unless there are some circumstances when this prohibition does not apply, and some conditions. And so the specific circumstances under which the data can be processed is, first of all, as we just discussed in the beginning, you gave consent. Yeah. If the purposes for which the data is used is scientific research, or if the interest is for the public health, public wealth, right? But also, let's imagine if someone is unconscious and the doctor should use the information to help to treat the patient. So to protect the vital interest, it's also the specific circumstances when the health data might be processed. These conditions apply with only if there are safeguards to protect the data. And which exactly safeguards, this regulation says in a very broad manner. They say that the appropriate safeguards are some technical and organizational measures, some principle of data minimization, and also pseudonymization. But which exactly are the technical organizational measures? It doesn't provide. Why? Because this regulation is, as I said, cross-sector regulation. It should be, you should find a way how you apply it in the healthcare. You should find a way to apply it depending on what type of data we saw you have in your hands, you are processing. How to minimize the data, how to pseudonymize the data. There are several techniques now, but the law doesn't say how exactly you should do it. So you should find a way how to do it. And I want to bring your attention to the difference between the pseudonymized data and the anonymized data, because in clinical trials, when a participant comes, wants to participate in the trial, we never share his direct identifiers. So meaning that we never share the name and the surname of the patient. Instead, what is done is a gold standard. A gold standard, we attribute a code instead of the name. So we pseudonymize the data, right? And so pseudonymization, it means that the personal data can no longer be attributed to a specific person without the specific information, meaning that those who created the code, they have a key to the code. So as long as you have the key to the code, you can figure out who's the individual. And usually those are hospitals in a clinical trial. They don't share the key to the code with the sponsors, of course. And so why we're using it? Because pseudonymized data reduces the risk of re-identification, but it is still reversible because you still have the key. So some examples of pseudonymized data: participant in the trial, they get one code, for example, for the history, for the medical history, and they have another code for the results of the clinical trial one. So it is like a double coding, which enhances the security regarding the reversibility to get back to the patient and know who is that. Another example is when you are undergoing a blood test, your blood is always put in tube. The tube never has your name. It's always a barcode, but behind the barcode is your name and your surname, your date of birth. So this is another example of pseudonymization in a clinical trial setting or in a hospital. While anonymized data, it is personal data, but can no longer be attributed to a person. So irreversible. You don't have any key. You cannot know who is behind that. But the risk of re-identification is never zero. The risks are never, ever zero. Example of anonymized data: when you are doing a publication, you are aggregating some data and you are publishing, okay, there are X number of patients or X percentage of patients with a specific health disorder, and then you provide a range of age of the participants. So this is anonymized. You cannot single out who is behind. Another example: you collected the blood into the tubes, but you forgot to put the barcode. So this is another example of anonymized data. But however, and very important in the clinical trial setting, in the hospital, it is very, very hard to put really strong, robust anonymization techniques. So that's why I'm taking a caution about the health data protection. You have to assume that the data is never anonymized in clinical trials, because there was a study that evaluated, so they had different number of data sets. And from those data sets, they tried to do different combinations, and they were able to figure out 99% who is the individual behind that data. And this is a very important implication at the regulatory point of view, the difference between anonymized and pseudonymized data. Because the anonymized data, if it's really anonymized, in practice, you have to do the test of reversibility to see how much effort you put, or ask a hacker to de-anonymize the data. And you have to document it to prove that it's really anonymized and your technique is working. And then you don't have to comply with any regulations, so you don't have the burden of this compliance. Pseudonymized data, it is considered still as personal data, and that's why you should get compliant with the general data protection regulation to respect the individual's rights, privacy, put in place the controls of security measures, and request consent where applicable. So this is just to make a resume. Another technique of security is just a principle. It's a principle of GDPR, data minimization. But what does it mean? It means just don't keep your personal data of your research just in case. You really have to collect the data which is necessary to answer your question. Meaning, in a clinical trial, you have a protocol, and the protocols are clear objectives, and you have to collect the data which help you to answer strictly the objectives in the protocol. So in practice, how to do it? It's better to avoid the full date of birth, to replace the age by the range of age, to delete any unnecessary details on the images, on scans, biopsies, avoid the location, even a name of investigational site. This is very important, especially in case of rare disease. It's very easy to figure out who is the individual. And if you can double code, you should do it. A very important thing is the publications of the case reports. Don't use what they put like a black, if you have the face of the individual, a black tape on eyes, because very often if you take, for example, Obama and you put black type on the eyes, you can still know it's Obama. So I just provide you a little reference in case some of you are medical doctors and you will be writing a case report for a publication, how to do it properly. A couple of guiding questions for data minimization. So just ask yourself if the data you collect satisfies the objectives for which you collected. If there are any data items that you could remove or potentially even not collect. And in case you want to keep the data for longer or for secondary use, how do you manage, what techniques do you put in place to avoid the risk of re-identification? So these were just general concepts and principles of the GDPR. I wanted to show you through these examples that the law doesn't say you exactly what you should do. You should find it by yourself and apply those principles during your daily work. And the importance of difference between personal data, non-personal data, regular data, sensitive data, anonymized data, and pseudonymized data. And before I pass to the next chapter, I just wanted to make a little quiz with you. It will be just the raise of hands. A data set contains a patient ID number, so the code, the CT scan, the diagnosis. The hospital keeps the key linking the code to the patient. So what type of data is this? So who says it is anonymized? Okay, who says it is pseudonymized? Okay, yes, right, it is pseudonymized because it is coded. Is it considered personal data? Who thinks it is considered personal data? Raise your hands. Okay, who thinks it is considered non-personal data? Okay, there are doubts. So it is considered as personal data because even pseudonymized data is considered as personal data. Another example, a data set contains age, gender, postal code, and diagnosis. So no names or no codes, no ID are included. What type of data is that? Is it anonymized data? Who thinks it's anonymized? Okay, a couple. Who thinks it's pseudonymized? Okay, it's not anonymized and it's not pseudonymized because actually I left this question, it's a debateful question. Why? Because in some context, just having this information, you can compile all that information and find out who is the individual. So clearly it is not anonymized. It is not pseudonymized because there is no code, you know. So this is a tricky one. Is it considered personal data? Okay. Is it considered non-personal data? Why do you think it's non-personal?
There is nothing that can move, but there is the name of wow.
Yeah, it can. You can be also right, but again, depending on the context, depending who has the data, depending if the diagnosis is a rare disease, we can put all that together. It can be also personal. Another example, I think it's you who gave this example. The real-time heart rate from a wearable device. You have like a watch, for example, and it is you linked to a user account. What type of data is that? Is it personal? Who thinks it's personal? Okay. Who thinks it's non-personal? Okay, so it's personal data, of course, because even if there is no name, direct name, it is linked to a user account where you provide this information. Who thinks it is regular data? Okay, who thinks it is sensitive data? Okay, not many. Okay, I think there are some doubts. So this is sensitive data. Why? Because the heart rate, it is considered as a health data, and health data is sensitive data. And so I propose you to do a little break now, like 10 minutes. So I think we can start. It will be like another half an hour, 40 minutes, and then just those who are staying for the workshop, you can stay. So it's about the EHDS a little bit more in details, just to explain you what is that, why is that, and how even you as an individual are impacted. Okay. So I get back to the example with which we started. The patient comes to the HCP to receive primary care, and then the researcher wants to reuse the data for some research questions. So we are talking about the primary use, and then we talk about the secondary use of the data. So the European Health Data Space Regulation, it covers these two aspects. The first is the use of data for the primary care, and then the secondary use, which is for research, for innovation, for policy making and regulatory activities. And it is very important that the goal of EHDS regulation is to empower individuals actually to take control over their electronic health data. And not least, it also addresses the interoperability. So it provides guidance to the organizations what they should put in place to standardize the data and to make it interoperable. Also a frame for data governance and the protection and security. So interoperability, we saw between labs, patient-generated data, EHR from hospitals, databases. But what is that exactly? So actually, it is ability of different information systems, devices, or applications to access, exchange, or integrate the data in a cooperative manner and in coordinated manner within and across some organizational, regional, and national boundaries. So the goal is to provide in timely and seamlessly the portability of information. Again, the example, if you are not in your country and you are coming to an emergency room, they have to get access to your health data to provide you care. And the final and the ultimate goal is clearly to optimize the health of individuals and populations globally. So in practice, interoperability, who is concerned? It is not just IT department, it is everyone within an organization. If we are talking about the hospital, it is clinicians, it is nurses, and the top management. And the interoperability doesn't come alone. Of course, it should be a collaboration between all of those players to test the feasibility of this interoperability. Not least, it is also policies and procedures, which should something that should really work, not just some papers, but something feasible and known by all those actors. The goal is clearly to facilitate the workflow of the HCPs, because the HCPs, they don't have time to enter all the data in the good format, etc. So probably would be needed somebody who does it for them. Clearly to avoid a lot of different types of apps and platforms, so a lot of connections, usernames, passwords to remember, and clearly to decrease the number of data, so the data entry. This is a couple of words about interoperability. Secure environment, what does that mean? So EHDS says that the environment should be, that the data that is handled should be only anonymous. So again, this reflects a little bit the intersection of EHDS and GDPR, what we just saw, the importance of anonymity. And if not possible to exchange anonymous data, it should be pseudonymized, but never directly identifiable data. The amount of data should be minimized. So again, the GDPR, we just talked about those principles are also reflected in the EHDS regulation and clearly in a closed, secured environment and standards for the cybersecurity. In practice, security of personal data. Why? We should keep the confidentiality of data, the integrity of data, If not, otherwise we will get bad results and unreliable results from the research. And of course, the availability of data. Remember, I don't know if you followed up when the hospital St. Pierre, they were hacked. Everything was shut down, even emergency rooms were closed, everyone for emergency questions were deviated, and even doctors came back to ensure the care based on the papers they had and not digital formats, EHR, that are now. So the availability is very important of data. How exactly should be done? Clearly, maintenance and repair of the hardware, safeguards regarding the connection, security equipment of software, firewalls, etc. So it's more IT department. The integrity here comes a little bit broad participation, not only the IT, but also all the players who have access to the data, meaning that there are file permission and user access control. So everyone who has access are responsible with the users, with the digital signatures, with the passwords. Of course, a backup should be put in place, and in case there are fire or water, so there are also measures against the non-human threats that should be put in place. Confidentiality, the staff should be trained, the policies should be in place, and also the access should be under very strict conditions. I provide you here some examples of the security measures. So there are organizational measures, policies, procedures, how you manage the data breaches, technical measures, the IT, physical security measures, so regarding the non-human threats, and also, and very important, are the contracts when you are sharing data, and the data protection agreements are very important regarding the parties who are in there, and they should include what are the measures, how the data, what data will be exchanged, if the data will be transferred outside the European Union. A word on the data governance. Maybe sometimes you have like very general idea what is data governance. Data governance is a very global concept, so it's a concept that applies to people, to tools, technology an organization might have, and also the processes that are within an organization. So when you have all these three tools, you have to interconnect them and to optimize their work. So when you're talking about people, people should have specific expertise that are needed, skill, and you should distribute clearly the roles and responsibilities, because if the roles and responsibilities are not clearly distributed, no one knows what to do and how to handle the data. Tools and technology, it's clearly you have to develop all those tools or hire or outsource providers of those tools, keeping in mind the regulatory requirements regarding the infrastructure, the data security, generate data catalogs, metadata, so it's data about data, you have to describe what data you have, so that the others, it will be very helpful for the others to find the data without exposing your real data, what you have. And finally, the policies and procedures, the plan how the data is managed, and importantly, the risk assessment and the remediation plan. What could happen to the data? What could be the risks to the individual to whom the data belongs, and how to decrease the risks? Data sharing plan. Sharing can be internally within an organization, between departments, but also externally with the partners within Europe, outside Europe. So there should be a plan, and sometimes it is even requested when you are submitting some specific documents to have the approval to do your clinical trial. Now let's focus on the secondary use of data, because the primary use is specifically for the healthcare professionals. So the next flow of the slides will consider only the secondary use of data, and specifically for the research and the innovation. So the secondary use, it means that you process electronic health data for other purposes than the initial ones for which they were collected. It means, for example, you did a clinical trial, there were specific objectives in the protocol, you collected the data, but then on the road you saw, oh, I observed this kind of response from the participants. Let's analyze something else. So this is another purpose. which is not in the initial protocol. So this is a secondary use. The regulation states a list of secondary purposes. So there are activities for reasons of public interest, policy making, regulatory activities, and scientific research that contributes to the public health or the social security, ensures high levels of quality and safety of healthcare, of medicinal products or medical devices. So it also, a secondary purpose can be used in for medical device development, for in vitro diagnostic medical device development. So we are going to MDR, EVDR, so all the medtechs who are developing devices, for example, trackers of glycemia or implantable devices. I think you had a whole course on that. And of course, secondary use for the AI systems and digital health applications. There are also prohibited purposes stated by the regulation. So the prohibited are those that are in detriment with the individual or a group of individual, or leading some exclusion from a benefit of an insurance, or some that are having some commercial purposes like advertising. This is prohibited. Or in general, the secondary purposes to design harmful products or services like illicit drugs, alcoholic beverages, etc. So we saw which are the secondary purposes covered by the EHDS regulation. We saw which are prohibited purposes for reusing data. Now, which data actually can be used for the secondary use? So first of all is the electronic health records, like patient summaries, electronic prescriptions, medical images, laboratory results, human genetics, epigenetics, genomics, human molecular data, like omic data, and personal electronic health data from medical device or health application, what you just gave as an example. So this data might be reused for another purposes. There are actors that are defined by the regulations. So, of course, on the top are the data subjects who generate actually the data from whose health data is being used. And then there are data holders and the data users. So the data holders, it can be a natural or a legal person that has the right or an obligation to process the electronic health data. And the users, it's also a natural person or a legal person, which has been granted lawful access to electronic health data for secondary use. By who? By the health data access bodies, which are in the middle, and which are supposed to manage all the processes relating to the data sharing between those actors, as prescribed by the EHD. So the majority of the responsibilities are on them. Example of actors, so health data users, researchers, innovators, developers of medical devices, policymakers, healthcare institutions. Health data holders, who are they? Hospitals, healthcare professionals, also innovators, the pharmaceutical companies doing clinical research, collecting a lot of data are within those. And I'm coming to the health data access bodies. So what is that? So those bodies should be created, which this is enshrined by the EHDS regulation in each European member state. It can be one health data access body or several ones. And so what is their role is to be neutral, of course. They themselves, they don't handle any data that will be shared, but they act in the public interest and they take the decisions. When somebody asks to use data for secondary purposes, they check all the requirements, if all the requirements are met, and then they issue a permit for that. And there is a HDAB in Belgium, it's called Health Data Agency, and I provided you, I don't know if you had the opportunity, they have a very good website explaining in a very plain language about their role and about data sharing. So you can go and check if you didn't have the opportunity until now. And so why are the hospitals, the labs, clinicians are concerned by the European Health Data Space Regulation? Because, as I told, they are health data holders and they have obligations which are enshrined by this regulation, both for primary use and for the secondary use. And they have the obligation to make available the electronic health data. And they have the obligation to prepare, if the data is not in good formats, to be exchangeable and shared. Besides hospital and public institutions, sponsors of clinical studies are also concerned. Innovators like medtechs, biotechs are also concerned. Why? Because they are considered as a data holder, because they are performing trials to test their device or their product. So they collect the data for secondary use, and they are obliged also to make the data available. I provide you some key responsibilities of the data holder, which we already discussed, and also key responsibilities of data users, so that they should access and process the electronic health data only in accordance with the data permit which should be issued by the health data access body, the HDEBs, or the health request was approved and the access approval from the relevant authorized participant. And there is a specific, I provide you later the link to the specific website where you can have more information about this access for the data. Clearly, they should not provide access to third parties, only to them, not to attempt to re-identify the natural persons. And important one is that they should make public the results. So they should share what are the outcomes for which the data was reused. So how to request access to data? If you're a researcher and you need more data, you can find your national contact point for the secondary use and then apply for a permit from a health data access body. There are clearly some conditions that you should provide some information that the data will be handled accordingly to the law. I will not go into the details. And sometimes there might be fees that apply. There are no detailed information on that one, but it's related more to administrative costs and not to make a business on it. Key insights for the data subjects. So clearly the goal is to protect the privacy. No direct identifiable data is shared. And there are also opt-out mechanisms that should be put in place. Opt-out, it means that your data will be reused by default, and it means that you have to make an action if you want to oppose to the reuse of your data. And of course, the individuals, they have rights. And what are those rights? I will cite the rights under GDPR because those rights are kind of reflected in the EHDS regulation. So clearly they have the right to information, to get access to the data, to rectify in case they find some errors, or ask for erasure, the right to be forgotten. Probably you heard about that. Restrict the processing. So you say, stop, I don't want anymore that my data is processed. Or you can ask your data to be transferred to another party, which you consider. For primary care, you can ask from your GP to transfer your data for a specialist, for example. You have the right not to be subject to the automated decision-making. It means specifically at the actual employment of the AI tools. And you have the right to lodge a complaint if you think that someone handles your data improperly. And these rights are reflected in the EHDS regulation with more specificities regarding to the primary use and the electronic health records. But those rights are not absolute. It means that you cannot exercise those rights by default. Why? Because those rights are applicable depending on which is the legal basis that allows actually to process your data. So sometimes the right to erasure is not applicable if, for example, a sponsor of a clinical trial, they test a drug and they collect the adverse events of the drug. So the collection of adverse events actually is a legal obligation because it's the safety of the population, and this information cannot be erased. Or, for example, if the legal basis is to protect the vital interests, so the person cannot object to that. Portability doesn't apply also if it's a legal obligation or public interest or legitimate interest, and I will show you later the example why, and it should be analyzed case by case. So it's not something black or white, it is very context dependent. Those are three main legal bases applied in healthcare clinical research. In total, there are 6, but I will focus only on those ones. If you're doing clinical research, you can rely on consent or on the legitimate interest. But you can do your research for the public health interest. The safety events, as I told, it's a legal obligation, and in case of the medical care, it's a public interest, or it's the vital interest of the individual. And I would like to bring your attention that when you are reusing data for another objectives, the legal basis might be different. The person might have consented for the initial one, but not for the secondary use. And this is often the case when the AI tools are developed. And a very important nuance about consent. There are 2 types of consent when you are participating in a trial. So there is an ethical consent and a legal consent. So an ethical is something standard. Without ethical consent, you cannot participate in the trial. So it's a fundamental condition, and it's also an obligation from procedural point of view. And legal perspective, so we are talking more about GDPR. It's an instrument that allows you to process the data. So it's some kind of a little bit frustrating, because if you don't have legal consent, you cannot process data, but then it doesn't make sense. If you don't process data, you don't have results of your research. Those goes together, but those are 2 different consents. And both of them should be, for example, in the informed consent form. So in some cases, you can still process health data, not based on the consent. It can be the legitimate interest. The legitimate interest for scientific research. Legitimate interest for public interest in the area of public health, or protect the vital interest. And also importantly now, with this all the AI-based technology, AI is also using data for AI will rely also on legitimate interest. This is a proposal of the digital omnibus to simplify all these burdensome regulatory requirements, but we'll see if it will be voted or not. And we get back to the initial example, the transparency and the right to the information, right? So when the patient comes to get the primary care, the patient have expectations to receive the care. So it's not that the clinician will ask consent. So it's subject, like implicit consent, that the clinician can collect the data from the patient. And then when the researcher wants to reuse the data, the patient should be informed about that too. But clearly, the researcher is not in direct contact with the patient. So there should be collaboration between the clinicians and researchers for these transparency reasons. The clinicians should inform the data subject that that data will be reused. And this way, the researcher informs like indirectly the data subject. So information at 2 points. So what those information notices should contain? It should contain who is the responsible for the data processing, meaning who is responsible to put all the security measures in place. And it's just, again, general lines, how it should be done, concise, transparent, intelligible, but you should find a way to make it concise, transparent, intelligible, easily accessible. So what should this include? Contact details of control, let's say sponsoring clinical trial, purposes of the processing, information about other purposes, secondary use, legal basis. The rights of data subjects should be clearly indicated. So I'm talking about this privacy notice of 20 pages that you don't read. So it should not be so big. And talking about the cross-border infrastructure, yes, so European Health Data Space also aims to facilitate actually the transfers of data between European member states. to connect the healthcare professionals, but also to connect the health data access bodies. And if you want to know more about your electronic health data, a couple of weeks ago, it was the app Ma Santé in Belgium was launched. So you can access via the websites. And normally you should have access to all your pooled information about health, like health summaries, exams. I didn't go yet. It's like 10 since approximately 2 weeks. So you can go and you can check. If you're not in Belgium, there is a website where you can see in each European member state they're obliged to put it in place. And so yes, some key takeaways. Clearly, when you are sharing data, you should think firstly about the patient and the individual in the middle. You should involve also the patient, meaning you should inform them what and for which purposes your data is used, and provide feedback about the results and outcomes for which the data were used. Clearly, an interdisciplinary collaboration between several experts, put in place effective data governance to create the trust between all the players, and awareness and culture of privacy and data protection. This is not the last thing to take into consideration. So with this, thank you for your attention. And then those who stayed for the workshop will do it with that.